Alright, CNT125, our switches and VLANs lab. I downloaded a copy of the lab from D2L onto my desktop here. I just launched it from here, so I have that for easy reference. First part, we're looking at the network map. We'll need to cable up our switches and workstations. So, at your lab station, find your two PCs, find their patch cables. You might need to reach behind and trace them over to the box on the equipment rack. Unplug those patch cables and plug them into the appropriate switch. I'm using my two Cisco switches that are on the top of my equipment rack. Whether you're on the top or bottom, there's two identical 2960 switches next to each other. I would use those. I would use those for your network this time. So I've taken my two workstations, PC1, that's the one I'm using right now. I have cabled that into my top switch. My other PC, my other student lab PC, I'm calling that PC2. I've cabled that into the bottom switch. I've also gotten myself an orange crossover cable at the side of the lab room, and I've connected that between my two switches using port 24 and port 24. Ports do matter now on when we are cabling up our switch. Previously they did not, they do matter now. So I do need to pay attention to my crossover cable, my trunk link between my two switches needs to be port 24 to port 24. And my workstation PC1, I'm plugging it into, if you take a look here, I'm going to plug that into the first couple ports, basically the first 5 ports. And the same thing with PC2, I'm going to plug into the first 5 ports. We're going to be assigning VLANs, and it's going to matter where these are plugged into. So, that's my initial physical configuration, my hookup. Now that I have that done, I want to establish my console connection. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, before I get ahead of myself. Now that those are physically connected, let's get our workstation's IP addresses set, and we will actually verify with a ping. Now, I did PC2 first, so it's already set and ready to go. I'm now going to do this PC, or PC1. So I'm going to open up the network settings on this guy and configure the IP address on it. I'm going to follow what's on the map here. Now, there's multiple ways on a Windows PC to get to my network settings. I can use the start button over here and start typing in network and come up with OK network status, network settings. Once I'm here, I can actually use property buttons here and work my way into and actually edit my settings. Okay. I prefer to use, I'm going to go back out here a little bit further. Let's go back out here. I'm going to start this again. Let's do network. And we'll do that. That's fine. In here, here's my network and internet. Once that's open, I actually prefer to use kind of the old school network and sharing center, because this actually shows my Ethernet 3 connection. That's my current network connection that I have active. As I open this guy up, this brings up this activity window showing whether it's passing or receiving data. For a lot of people, this is very familiar from like Windows XP, 7, etc. and on. I'm going to go to properties here. This brings up all of the client services and protocols for this network connection. And I'm going to edit the TCP/IP version 4. So I'm going to hit properties on this guy. And I'm going to plug in the 172.16.1.201. My other workstation is 202, so I need to make sure this is not conflicting. If I look at the network map, I actually need to use a 255.255.255.0. I'm using a Class C subnet mask. Okay, so follow along with what's there. You also note that we don't need a gateway. We don't have any routers in here, so I don't actually need to plug one in. So I'm actually going to leave that blank. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to say close. I'm going to say close. You notice I'm not exiting out with the X in the corner. I'm going to do close. I can even close this guy here too. And I'm now going to, I'll close this one as well. I'm now going to verify with my command prompt. There should be on the bottom bar a shortcut to command prompt. If not, click the Windows, start typing a command prompt, launch that guy. And we are going to verify with ipconfig. Let me get my cursor up there. There we go, ipconfig. I'm going to look at my Ethernet 3 connection. That's the one that's active. And I'm going to verify my 172.16.1.201 is there, which it is. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to verify that I have connectivity to that other PC. So I'm actually going to ping 172.16.1.202. And I should get it successful. At this point, I should get it successful. If I do not, I need to check my IP settings on this machine. I need to check the IP settings on the other machine. I also need to trace through my cables and make sure from the back of the student PC, trace that patch cable through and make sure it's going to the correct switch. Same thing on the other PC, trace it through, make sure it goes to the correct switch, and then make sure I'm using a crossover between the two switches in our port 24. Double check all those. If you change anything, reissue the ping command. And again, you should be getting successful. All right. If you don't, that's when you need to, again, retrace your steps, check your IP, subnet mask, check your patch cables, trace them through to the switch ports, and double check all of your connections. All right. Now that we have that going, and this should work because we don't have any VLANs on the switch yet, this should be working. We are now going to connect into the switch to start configuring and put VLANs on. So I'm going to close my command prompt out just to declutter my screen. I'm going to launch my console connection utility, my terminal emulation program. On my desktop, there's a program called PuTTY. I'm going to launch this guy. While it's here, I'm going to plug in the COM port setting that we're using, COM1. We've plugged the cable into the back of the PC, and that is COM1. Now, I can verify that if I go to my device manager. Okay, if I pull up my device manager and go down to my ports, if I open up and look, I should see COM1. That's the port that's on the back. So I'm saying, hey, use the port on the back to connect into the switch in this case. So we're using COM1. I can always verify that through command, through the device manager. So COM1, 9600 for the speed, serial port. I'll highlight this, default settings, and do save. That way it kind of is always there. So now when I open this the next time, that setting should be there. I should be able to rock and roll. So I'm going to say open. And I now have connection to my switch. Now, just like in Packet Tracer, nothing's showing because we've sent no commands to the switch. So I'm going to hit the enter key, and it actually prompts up a question. All right, in the lab here, I have in here, hey, if you get prompted for enter initial system configuration dialog, we're going to say no. This is a setup program. This is a setup program we're not going to use on the switch or the router for that matter. So if you ever see enter initial system configuration dialog, we're going to say no. So I'm going to hit, I'm going to click in here. I'm going to say no. Hit the enter key, and I get my switch prompt. All right. If by chance you said yes to this, it's going to start asking you questions. Control-C will get you out. Let me say that again. If you accidentally answer yes and it starts asking you odd questions, Control-C will boot you out. At this prompt, actually at this point, I'm at a prompt that I can actually start my switch configuration. Next podcast, we will do just that.